In this video, I'm going to show you a simple Photoshop compositing technique that you can use to remove light stands from your images in less than 2 minutes. Then we're going to pause, we're going to go back through and talk about how this image was lit, how it was shot, and how it was edited to give you a full tutorial on this image. Let's dive in. What's up guys, my name is Pi and welcome to SR Lounge. This is your place for no-nonsense photography education, tips, tricks taught by professionals, but designed for everybody. Today it's all about compositing to remove light stands. Now why would you want to do this? Number one, well maybe you don't have enough power in your lights, you're using small speed lights, you have to bring them close to your subject. Number two, maybe you're shooting wide and you're going to catch your light stands in the shot because the composition requires it. Number three, for creative purposes, you want your lights to be in certain places. You want to make sure that it really highlights certain things. And to do that, the light's going to be in the shot. This is really an example of all three of those things. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into how to do this composite technique first. Then we're going to talk about how the image was shot. So that way you guys don't have to do that whole annoying scrubbing thing just to get to where you want to be. You know what I mean? Okay, so here we are inside of Lightroom. Let's go ahead, Alex, put up the 2-minute timer, or Mike or Carlo, I'm sorry, whoever's editing this, put up the 2-minute timer. This is where they go, damn it! He said to put up the timer again, that's extra work for me. So where I am in Lightroom right now is I have my shot here that I like, and I have my plate shot right next to it. The plate shot is just the image, it's the same exact image with the light stands removed. All I'm going to do is this image has been color graded. What I'm going to do is go ahead and apply the same settings over to the plate image by hitting previous. Okay, so step number one is complete. Both of our images, our shot and our plate, have been edited identically. What we're going to do now, step two, go right click with both images selected, go to edit in, and then open as layers in Photoshop. This is a good place to remind you guys that this technique is best done when you're using a tripod because it's going to be automatically aligned when you're doing that. But you can still do it handheld so long as you're not, drunk, cracked out, those kind of things. What I'm saying is you got steady hands. Don't do those things. Those things aren't good. Yeah. So select both these layers, and regardless of whether you're doing it handheld or on a tripod, you're going to go ahead and go up to Edit and then go to Auto Align Layers and click Automatic. Now it's going to automatically align those layers as it needs. Again, if it's on a tripod, you're not going to see really any movement, but it's still a good idea to do because it's going to make sure that it's kind of pixel perfect. If it's handheld, you might see white edges where it had to move the images to get them aligned. Either way, you're just going to crop those out. So now what we're going to do is select the layer with the light stands in it. And step three is just to add our mask. Well, step four actually. Add the mask, and then what you're going to do is select B to get your brush tool, and with B as your selected color, with black as your selected color, you're going to go ahead and use your mouse or Wacom brush with a very low hardness. So hardness is set to 0, and you're just going to paint over. So I'm actually just using my mouse right now. Now in a shot like this where a little bit of that light was spilling onto the ground, what I'm going to do is just replace the entire right side of the image with the underlying image, right? So if I hold down Alt or Option and click this, I'm just going to go ahead and make sure this whole right side is painted black. And now what we end up seeing is, here's our final image with our subject lit, and on the right side, it's just revealing the underlying image, this underlying image where there was no lighting, right? So that's it. At this point, save it out, and you're done. This is where we stop our timer. What was the time? If it was slightly over 2 minutes, just understand that you could do this in less if you weren't talking like a blabbering idiot like me. Okay? So now let's go ahead and pause because we're going to go back and we're going to do a full tutorial on how this image was lit and shot. So let's go ahead and go back to Lightroom for just a moment. I'm going to create a duplicate copy of this. So let's just go ahead and create a duplicate. And now what I'm going to do is reset this out, Control-Shift-R or Command-Shift-R to reset it out inside of Lightroom so we can see here is the raw file. So as you're seeing the beautiful behind the scenes example of this image from Lighting 3, I'm going to talk through it. Let's start first with, well, in Lighting 3, we talk about CAMP. CAMP stands for Composition, Ambient Light, Modify or Ambient Exposure, Modify Light, and then Pose and Photograph, okay? So this is your step-by-step process that I want you guys to think of in every single scene that you shoot. Just remember, CAMP. So starting first, before I even set up any lights, it was figuring out what do I want my composition to be. So I set up my camera and my tripod, and what I was aiming for was I wanted to get my subject, Seth, placed in an area where the background itself could kind of frame him. So what I did was I placed him in this area of the cafe where these bars kind of frame him and the bike, and I placed his head in the frame against the darkest place of that background. So what you end up seeing is the hair light coming from the sun, as well as the background and everything kind of combines to create this darker background that he's highlighted against, and he pops out of that little section of the shot. So it kind of creates a nice contrasting edge there. In addition, all the lines sort of lead into our subject, right? All these perspective lines are dropping directly into him, and he's framed right underneath the cafe with both the motorcycle and him kind of sharing that space. So that was step number one. That was my composition. Now step number two is the ambient light exposure. So here I'm deciding on intention. This is where we go back to lighting one. You know the difference between a natural light looking image, like a natural looking shot, versus a dramatic looking shot. It has nothing to do with whether you're adding flash or not. It has to do with that ambient light exposure. If you want a more dramatic looking image, you're going to pull the ambient exposure down and pump up the flash power. If you want a more natural looking image, you're going to brighten the ambient exposure and lower any modification or any flashes or anything that you're doing. You're going to keep the additions to the light very subtle and very kind of refined and low. So here we want dramatic. So what do we have? Well, 1/200 of a second and f/18 with ISO 50. So obviously, you know, we're shooting this around midday. This is freaking bright outside, and this is one of the reasons that our lights have to be so darn close. Okay, so we have our ambient light set. Now we go to modify or add light, right? This is the shot, and I'm going to reset this out as well. This is the shot without any lights whatsoever. So this is the place where we have our ambient light exposure, and now we decide, okay, what do we want to do with this image in terms of adding or modifying light? Clearly, we need to add light if we're going to go with something this dark and we want our subject to be highlighted. So what we started with is a 2 light stacking technique. So this light stacking technique is designed to do a couple different things. We're using about 400 to 500 watt seconds of light over here, and you can accomplish this with, say, a ProPhoto B10 Plus. You can do 280-200s, but what's going on is these are being fired through a mag box with the focus diffuser. So this first light is sort of lighting up our subject and creating a general fill over that area. The second light we placed very close to our subject, and it's just a standard speed light with a grid and a dome attached to it, this mag sphere. And all this light is doing is it's a few feet from his face, and it's just punching in a little bit of light. That's why we have the grid on there, to kind of funnel the light as well as diffuse the light slightly and get it to land on his face, to sort of chisel his face out. So this double light stacking technique creates a bit more of a painterly look to the shot, because we add light to an entire area, and then we chisel out our subject by adding more light to, say, the area that we want our viewer to focus on. That's the face. So that's exactly what we're doing here. Then we simply pose and photograph. We have Seth standing there, we give him a kind of expression, a look, and we take our shot. Now we're inside of Lightroom. Let me show you what we did to edit this image. So I actually used the VFlow. This is the Visual Flow preset kit that we have that should be released, or if not, it's going to be really soon. But it's based on lighting condition based development. So I'm going to walk you through how it works in terms of, like, if you don't have the presets, that's totally fine. I'm going to show you the key features. But all I'm going to do is select this. So from the modern pack kind of defines the look. It's warm, it's punchy, it has a kind of nice edge to it. We're going to select flash because this image was lit with flash. Now in a single click, it's designed to basically polish the image on a statistical averaging of flashed images in this scene, what those settings should be. So all these settings are dialed in accordingly, and so we end up with a very refined look to the image with a single click. This is the before and the after with that single click. But what's actually being done over here? I'm going to explain this, and if it doesn't make sense, just pause the video and dial in the settings that you see over here on the right side. Over here on the right, what we're doing is we're pulling highlights and whites down quite a bit. So this is to retain our highlight definition. while still having good contrast. We're also lifting shadows and lifting blacks quite a bit. This is really extending the range of our camera and getting additional dynamic range out of the raw file that we're using. Then the tone curve is not only adding exposure, but it's also adding contrast to the image to kind of get that back. Because if I didn't have this tone curve right here, notice that if I turn this off, the image is going to look very, very flat. So this tone curve is not only adding exposure, but it's also adding back the contrast that we would have lost, okay? So we're reducing clarity a bit, we're reducing texture a bit. This is because a lot of our images are wedding and portrait-esque, and so we make these subtle modifications to kind of get skin just a little bit more pleasant, okay? But on this type of a shot, we can actually boost clarity a bit, and it would look great. We could also boost texture a bit because it's meant to be a little more of a grungy and edgy image. So scrolling down, we have HSL modifications across the board. This is a big part of what defines the look of this pack, and this pack is defined to have sort of rich kind of warmth to it, but also kind of pulling back some of the oversaturated colors that we might see in, say, the greens and the blues and other tones to kind of pull everything into alignment. Then we add a bit of split toning. So split toning, we're adding a little bit of warmth in the highlights as well as a little bit of warmth in the shadows. So we're adding a bit of kind of this yellows and reds to kind of add to the overall color. Okay, we add our standard detail sharpening and we use a little bit of noise reduction again for that kind of skin. We're getting to, on this image, does it matter? Not really. But for most portrait images, like if you're doing weddings, if you're doing portrait work, a little bit of noise reduction is a wonderful thing in smoothing skin a little bit. So that's really it when it comes to the settings that are being done and accomplished. Now, what I've done up here, and this is a really easy tip and trick for you guys, is I've created a tool set for Visual Flow users, and you guys can just create some of these on your own, but you'll notice that there's a radial burn narrow. All this does, if I press Shift M right here, it drops in a radial burn directly over the center of the image with a 0.5 exposure burn. So all you got to do is create one and save it out as a new preset and then make it one of your developed presets. And what this does is it allows me to add this burn without having to come up to the right side and dial it in, you know, each time manually. In addition, here's a little tip and trick. Hold down Alt or Option while mousing over that pin and pull it to the left or to the right to strengthen or to reduce the effect. Okay, so I'm actually going to strengthen the effect, and the only thing I'm going to adjust from here, this looks really nice. I'm just going to pull the blacks up a little bit more. Okay, actually I might pull the blacks up a tiny bit and then just strengthen that effect a little bit more. Oh, let's go there. And this is a little Lightroom glitch. You'll notice that the second time I go and adjust that pin, if I click and drag, sometimes it doesn't work. The best way to get around that little glitch, right now it's working okay. So if you notice that, just go back and select your preset again up here and it'll work fine. Okay, so that's honestly it when it comes to the overall look. I might actually bring back the clarity a little bit. I think it's a little bit much. Now, again, once we get to that place, so now we have our defined look, and if I was going to reset this out, or if we were to look at this raw, here's what the file would look like raw. Here's what it looks like with our color toning and adjustments. Then all we're gonna do is go to the plate shot and hit previous, right? We go back and hit previous, so that way this plate shot, all we've done here is just remove the lights from the shot. The camera's on the tripod, so the camera's not moving. We remove the lights, take the image again, and now we have our plate. So this is the shot we're going to use and make sure that it's edited the exact same way before we take it into Photoshop. So that way when we reveal that underlying layer, the color tone is identical in both those images. So that's a key piece right there. Now, if you're handheld, is it a big deal? Not really. I mean, you'll get good at this, and as you practice this, you'll see what happens. But if you're hand holding it, just make sure that you don't move from when you take the shot to when your assistant removes those lights, because if the camera moves, you know, it's gonna create problems when you have to align those layers and they don't quite match up. So just remember, if you're doing it handheld, stay really still, use like a kind of handheld tripoding technique or whatever it is to get that image steady. So at this point, all you do is select both these images, go edit in, open as layers, and now, well, you guys can go back to the beginning of the video if you forgot how to do the rest of it, because all you do is pull them in the Photoshop, you're gonna add your mask and go ahead and just Photoshop out those light stands very quickly, very simply. But that is the 2 light stacking technique for painterly portraits, along with how to remove light stands. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. This tutorial and this video actually comes from Lighting 3. Lighting 3 is our advanced location lighting course, and it features 25 advanced lighting scenarios and images where we work through not only how to shoot it, we talk about the composition, the ambient light, we set up the lights, we show you different lighting patterns and principles, but then we also walk you through the entire post-production for every single scene so you can see the images from start to finish. So if you guys want to learn more about that, go to srloungeworkshops.com. If you guys want to learn more about the Visual Flow preset system, go to vfpresets.com. And that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us what you want to see next. Peace. See you guys in the next video.